And then, so I'm going to start the marketing for Shogun because it is very close. So UI is done, almost done. Contracts have been tested. So we're going into audit, which shouldn't take long. And then Shogun is going to be the first build on X28 protocol. So people are going to be able to enter the auction for Shogun. So Shogun is going to be a hyperdeflationary protocol with a set distribution day, very similar to Volt. So Volt had 10 days. Shogun is going to be 28 days because we want to get in basically max adoption. Because the point of Shogun is to have liquidity webs with the entire build on TitanX ecosystem, very similar to Element 280. And the cool thing about Element 280 is Element 280 did roughly $3 million a day in volume during the minting phase.
Dang.
70% of that being arbitrage bots solely, not the buy and burns, because the prices were so out of whack across all pairs. So Shogun is going to essentially capitalize on that. We're going to create pairs with everything in the ecosystem. So to enter Shogun, you're going to need either liquid X28 or a TitanX stake. So with a TitanX stake, you'll be able to burn your stake to go into the auction. You'll get one-to-one value. So one of the cool things that we did in the auction is, so you go in with liquid X28 or TitanX stake. When you go in with, for example, 100 billion TitanX stake, you have to supply 100 billion TitanX liquid to be able to enter the auction, because otherwise the mechanics break and the math doesn't make sense. So half goes towards buying and burning Shogun and doing some other stuff, which is going to be clear in the white paper, and also liquidity webbing. So the stake gets burned. The 8% dev reward from the stake also goes towards the buy and burn, and the other 50% of the TitanX buys X28, buys Shogun, burns it, which constantly breaks the ARP ceiling on X28. And then the other side of it is you can also enter with liquid X28. Now, liquid X28, the interesting thing that we did in the auction is we made it one-to-one value with TitanX. So, for example, if X28 is trading at 0.9 TitanX per X28, that's a 10% discount on the one-to-one rate. You can get 100% of the value in the auction, which is like a social consensus of, hey, this is worth one TitanX. So if it's trading below 10, you can essentially get a 10% free ROI on your auction by entering with X28 if it's off peg. And if it's above peg, people just arbitrage it and mass burn supply of TitanX.
People just love arbitraging in general too.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I like the 28-day mint phase. That's legit. I really was happy with that length of time. So yeah, it's cool to see that you're doing that same model, because I did like it.
Oh yeah. That's so the other thing with Shogun is, so there is going to be an 8% transfer tax on Shogun. That is primarily going to be used for arbitrage bots.
Yeah.
So since Shogun is going to have roughly 35 pairs across the entire ecosystem, 35 plus, probably more going into the future. But it's going to have 35 pairs which constantly have different prices. So arbitrage bots will run through those pairs, every time paying the transfer tax. So the transfer tax, Shogun will have a very similar system to Volt. So Volt, the way Volt does perpetual auctions, is it buys supply off a market and then auctions it off into the future. That's your future auction supply. So it doesn't come from inflation, it comes from supply bought off market. Shogun is going to have the same. But Shogun feeds it a couple ways. Shogun also feeds it through the transfer tax. So with the transfer tax, 3% goes to liquidity wallet, to liquidity web, the ecosystem. 47% of the Shogun from the taxes gets burned. And the other 50% goes to the war chest. The war chest is essentially the perpetual auction for Shogun. So the arbitrage bots will be buying and feeding the war chest. Will essentially be burning Shogun. So you can do the math. If 70% of the volume on Element 280 was arbitrage bots, because I was watching the transactions very closely, because I'm like, hey, this is work on Ethereum, and it absolutely does. So that's roughly 2.1 million a day in volume that Element 280 had a day. If you do that times 50%, that's essentially $1 million a day of Shogun burned just through arbitrage, not the buy and burn. Yeah. And then you also have the other $1 million going into the war chest for perpetual auctions off into the future, and the buy and burn is going to be massively aggressive.
So it's cap supply from the beginning. It's just having like same thing with a Volt style, where it's a set supply, and then over 28 days you're auctioning off that full supply, and then after that it's going into the war chest. Okay.
So there's 2.8 billion supply that will get. So it's 100 million a day for 28 days, which is 2.8 billion. And then 100 million goes towards liquidity wallet that will set up the initial pairs. So we're going to try to get all the pairs live on day one. So the arbitrage blocks can get churning from day
Oh
one,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
which is
Smart.
a really cool idea. And
Yep.
the LP tokens get burned. So we'll set up the LPs and burn the LP token. So it's forever locked LP, which also creates something very interesting in the ecosystem. Because Uniswap v2 LP tokens, well, Uniswap v2 LP positions, they essentially accumulate the fees. So Shogun will also become an indirect supply sink for all the build on TitanX protocols as volume runs through those pairs. For example, Element Shogun, Volt Shogun, X28 Shogun, etc. That is essentially forever supply sink because all the fees get stuck in the pool. So it's making everything else hyperinflationary with it.
Right. Yeah, I like